Right. Thank you. Right. Hi, everyone who's joining us for the recording. This is Autism Understanding Scotland's self-care webinar on 27th of October. So if anybody who'd been attending our previous self-care webinar, this is an updated one. Whenever I go to a training session or a webinar, I always want to know, who are these people? Why should I be listening to them? So we'll introduce ourselves here. So my name is Marion McLaughlin. I am the CEO at Autism Understanding Scotland. I'm a qualified primary school teacher, and in my years in the classroom, I taught nursery to primary 7, every stage in between, support for learning, Macron time, you name it. I'm also one of the spokesperson for the Scottish Government's Different Minds campaign. I am a parent of an autistic child, and I'm late diagnosed autistic myself. I got my own, I was formally identified as autistic about 4.5 years ago now. Anne, do you want to quickly introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. My name is Anne Brown. I am the furthest person away. I'm up in Shetland. I am an autism practitioner at Autism Understanding Scotland, former learning support worker. I also have a qualification in person-centred counselling. I'm the parent of a beautiful autistic son, and I'm late diagnosed autistic myself. And I was at the grand old age of 42. Marion just put me at the post I was about 3 years ago.
Yeah, see, I was 39 though, so, you know, when I got formally identified, not that it's a race, not that it's a competition. Emma, you beat us both though, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was late diagnosed, but definitely a bit younger. And I actually just found out that my kind of secret route to diagnosis is no longer available. So I feel so lucky. I was diagnosed through my university, which, yeah, not many people seem to know was a service. Tangent, but yes.
Who are you though?
So I am Emma. As well as being late diagnosed autistic, I am an autism practitioner at Autism Understanding Scotland. I'm based in Edinburgh, so also a kind of remote member of staff, but hopefully I am going to be able to sort of get up to Aberdeen to do some events. I'm just back from being in Shetland for some training up there, which was great fun, and meeting Anne in real life for the first time. So previously I worked as a teacher as well, similar to Marion, but not for quite as long. I worked across the BGE from nursery up to secondary, so our lower secondary, and I also worked in a school for children with complex needs. And I did my learning, my master's at Edinburgh, doing a degree called Transformative Learning and Teaching. So I had a big focus on supporting during transitions.
Fabulous, thank you. Emma, are you happy to sort of quickly run over what people can expect to it? Because, you know, being teachers, we do like to set out learning intentions.
Yeah, I think it's also like the kind of visual timetable, or the timetable
right.
part now and next. So we're going to start with talking about what self-care is and what it isn't, because I think there can be a lot of different versions of that, especially in the media, and then why it's important. And then we're also going to talk about well-being, what well-being actually is as well. And that's kind of split into 8 dimensions, which we're going to talk about. We're going to give you examples in practice, because that's always useful to have good concrete examples. And also talk about why sometimes self-care might be more difficult for autistic people. But we're also going to provide strategies to kind of overcome some of those difficulties, perhaps. And we're also going to talk about something called self-soothing, and why that might have some benefits and why it might have some drawbacks, and talk about ways we can maybe do both at the same time, so self-care and self-soothing. And then are we having a Q&A at the end? Yeah. So a wee bit at the end.
Absolutely. That's always my favourite part, where we all get to have a chat together anyway. Yeah. So I think, if we have to think about what is self-care really, because we talk about self-care and it's one of those words that got bandied around a lot over the last couple of years with pandemic and, you know, lockdowns and all the rest of it. So self-care is really just taking steps that's going to improve your well-being, identifying and honouring the things that you want and the things that you need. And I think there is a huge big difference between something that you want and something that you need, and sometimes it can be really difficult to sort of work out where those things lie. It's recognizing and upholding self-worth, and we're going to have a little bit more of a chat about self-worth, because we know that that's something that an awful lot of autistic people really do struggle with. It's acknowledging that self-care isn't selfish, and I think that if there's one thing that we've said as an organisation in pretty much every one of our Thursday evening webinars that we've ran, is self-care is not selfish. It is okay to be practicing self-care. It's a good thing for people to be doing. And it's also, and this is something that I know that I've really struggled with, and lots of other people have really struggled with. It's acknowledging that your own needs are just as important as everybody else's, and that everybody else's needs are as important as yours. So there's no hierarchy there. If it's something that you need, then you need it. And it's so what somebody else wants is not more important than what it is that you need. And I think sometimes a lot of autistic people are very good at giving a lot of themselves an awful lot of the time, and then creating that boundary then to sort of say, right, what I need right now is this. I need this time to do some self-care. That can be really, really difficult. So I think self-care, a big part of self-care is acknowledging that your needs are really important and putting those boundaries in to ensure that you're in a position that you can then go and meet them. But Emma, you're going to talk us through what self-care isn't, because I think that's really important too, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, I think it's, you know, alongside a lot of the things we see on social media about self-care, it can kind of be confusing. And I think sometimes when we try to replicate what we're seeing in the media about what, you know, we're told self-care is, and then we sort of wonder, well, why don't I feel any better? Why isn't this working for me? I think a lot of it comes down to that point that a lot of people misunderstand what it is actually is really. So self-care shouldn't be focused on just making you feel more productive again. Being more productive might be a kind of added bonus of practicing self-care, but it shouldn't be the sole purpose. And I think sometimes we're made to think that, you know, if we're struggling to get to work or to get to school, or, you know, whatever it is that we feel like we're expected to do to be a productive member of society, if we feel like we're not able to do those things, we can feel really guilty and ashamed about that, and feel like all our efforts need to be put into being able to get back on our feet and doing those things again. That's kind of part of that whole sort of capitalist society whereby, you know, often our worth is equated to, are we earning money? Are we, you know, busy, productive workers? But self-care really isn't, as I say, it shouldn't just be about that. Yes, part of it might be that you are, you know, finding work easier again and so on and so forth, but it's really not that sole purpose. Self-care also isn't just about making you feel more calm or less anxious, which again sounds a bit funny to say because, you know, nobody wants to feel more anxious about things. But again, self-care, you know, part of it can be that it is helping, you know, alleviate anxiety and so on and so forth, but it's not the sole purpose. You know, we're not ignoring things. I guess it's that kind of, what is it? Sort of, what's it? Well, you know, when it's like lots of positivity.
Toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of just slapping on a label saying, you know, smile, you know, everything will be fine sort of thing. It is actually about acknowledging that life has lots of tricky moments, but you need to work through them. It's not just self-care is part of that. And yeah, that kind of goes on to the next point. It doesn't just involve ignoring or avoiding difficult emotions or situations. So part of self-care is about actually sort of acknowledging those and working through those, and knowing that actually part of that working through process is going to maybe involve some uncomfortable feelings, but in the longer term, you know, it means that those problems are sort of being dealt with, and then hopefully that will lead to you being less anxious, more calm. And finally, self-care isn't just bubble baths and glasses of wine, contrary to what Instagram might portray. Again, they are not necessarily harmful, and they can be part of a self-care routine perhaps, but it's certainly not just the case that, you know, you do that once a week and that's your self-care taken care of. It's quite a bit more than that.
It would be nice if that's all it was, though, wouldn't it? That would make it a lot easier.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, again, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of pampering at times, like we're going to talk about later, but hopefully this will see. The concept of self-care has really burst out a little bit more. We have our former colleague, Callum, to thank for bringing this to our attention as well. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of warfare. Dr. Lord wrote that in A Burst of Light, an essay collection back in 1988. And I think a lot of the time for autistic people, connecting back into your own body and into your own self is a political act, because we're so disconnected from that in a million different ways. And then this is like an extension back to that again, saying, yeah, my feelings, my sensory experiences, these things are real, they're legitimate, there's nothing wrong with them. I'm going to work with them, I'm going to support them, and I'm going to provide self-care for myself in order to do these things. Very, very much a political act. And it's really quite an empowering act, isn't it? It's taking back that power for yourself and saying, this is what I need. And I think that's it really is a powerful statement, isn't it, Emma?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is that thing of, it's, when if you're living in a society that says, your worth might be based on certain things, such as your income or your ability to do certain things, I think it is really like, it's a political statement to say, actually, no, like, I'm worth more than that, and I'm worth taking care of.
Absolutely. So you're going to cover, what is well-being? This was a really interesting.
Yeah, so just breaking that down a bit as well, because I think, again, well-being is can be a bit of a fuzzy word. And I think for autistic people, words that are fuzzy are not very useful. I love things to be specific. So when we're saying self-care is about taking care of our well-being, what is our well-being? So it's really referring to our complete health, and that includes physical, but not just our physical health. It doesn't just mean that we're free from disease or illness or stress, although again, that can be part of it, but it is actually it's much more than that. It involves feeling that we have a sense of purpose in life. So like having a reason to get up each day, being emotionally healthy, sort of in our relationship with ourselves and with other people, having meaningful relationships where people value you and you trust them. And, it's a sort of two-way supportive relationship. It's about having joy in your leisure time and sort of just overall, and work that is really fulfilling. And that doesn't have to mean, a big, fancy title, big income or anything like that. It's simply, part of what you're doing each day is something that, is really rewarding to you. And that even might be looking at volunteering things. It might be part-time work. It doesn't have to be, 9 to 5.
Housework.
Well, exactly. It can be looking after your children, looking after your dog.
Those things are work, aren't they? Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it's really important that you invest time in doing self-care to support your well-being.
So important. I think that I don't think we can say that quite often enough, can we? This is sometimes a really difficult slide for us whenever we're sharing it, because we know that some people really struggle with it. But self-care really is important because you do have intrinsic worth. Every single person on this planet has intrinsic worth. And you yourself, as much as anybody else in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. So one of the most popular posts that we put up on social media earlier on this year was whenever we encourage people to start to talk to themselves as if they were their own best friend, and give themselves the same love and care and attention that they would give to somebody that they love and cared for as well. And it can be really difficult to understand that you don't have to do or be anything for anybody else in order to have intrinsic value, but you do have intrinsic value purely on the basis that you exist as a human being. And if nobody's told you that before, then I'm really sorry, but please, if you take nothing else away from what we've said today, I think this is one of the biggest key messages. So we've got a couple of slides that Emma and I are going to have a look for. Your self-worth is not based on any of these things at all. Absolutely not. Your age does not determine your self-worth, your gender, your money, your fertility, your job, any of these things. And I know that a lot of us get judged for a lot of these things. I was at an appointment earlier on today where somebody asked me what my job was. And whenever I said that I was a CEO, their response was, "Whoa, Jess, that doesn't increase my value. I am worth no more now with the current job that I am as I had when I was a stable hand, which is a previous job that I had. My self-worth is exactly the same. So my job should not ever be it's something that people base my self-worth on, because I could have another job another time, couldn't I? I've had plenty of other jobs that haven't had nearly as fancy a title. Your sexuality does not define your self-worth either. And we know that there are an awful lot of people who are part of the autistic community who are also part of the LGBT plus community. We know that there's a lot of people in the autistic community who are transgender. These things do not define your self-worth either. You have intrinsic worth and value, regardless of what your sexuality or your gender is. Your productivity, your state of your mental health as well. And I think we work with an awful lot of people who, when their mental health is poor, they feel like their self-worth is really poor. And that's absolutely not the case. You still have the same intrinsic self-worth, regardless of the state of your mental health as well. Emma, we've got a few others, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things that we're sort of judged upon, isn't there? And it's really just reminding everybody that like your worth is not based on any of those things. So appearance, your weight, again, you know, thinking about the media, like we're often made to feel insignificant or less than if we don't replicate like what we're seeing around us, but it's really not the case. We might feel that like because of our education that we are more or less worthy than someone else. You know, if somebody's done a very fancy university degree versus someone that hasn't gone on to further education, sometimes there can be this sort of sense of, you know, they're less or more worthy than me, but this isn't the case. Support needs, so, and also just touching on sort of disability as well, being autistic, I think, I mean, of course, we're all kind of fed these messages that somehow we're deficit because we're, you know, divergent from the kind of normal brain type, and there's a lot of, you know, internal messages that we kind of have to work through. I think that's probably the case for a lot of autistic folk. If we, you know, rely on other people to a certain extent, if we're you know, have sort of interdependence with people that help us, that can sometimes lend us to feel a bit, you know, like, oh, you know, burdensome, or I'm asking so much of other people all the time, does this somehow make me less than? But again, it does not mean that you're less worthy than anyone else on this planet. Family, friendships, relationships in general, again, you know, there's so many of these kind of almost milestones that we're expected to reach at certain points of our life. Are we married? Do we have children? Do we have, you know, a large circle of friends? But again, none of these things mean that we're more or less worthy.
We had an interesting chat about intelligence, didn't we, just before we started? Yeah. I mean, we actually did debate whether or not to write perceived intelligence rather than, and I think we just don't like the idea of intelligence as a concept. Because there's these IQ tests that people can take, but I don't think that they're a reliable metric of what somebody is capable of, even in the slightest. But a lot of people do place a lot of value on this, don't they?
Definitely. And I think that ties in with that sort of level of education thing as well, that perceived you know, version. And then also past events is another one. So again, you know, if negative sort of traumatizing even events that happened during your past, there can be that tendency to feel like, oh, I've, you know, I deserve bad things to happen to me because I've let these things happen, or, you know, bad things always happen to me. I'm not worth spending the time on. And again, all of these things, they don't affect your self-worth.
Your self-worth. There's so many other things that we could potentially add, you know, but I again, it is intrinsically there. It is intrinsically important. And I know we seem to be banging on about this a little bit, but I think the fact is that so many of these things are really ingrained into us. You know, I remember changing religion and having family members really not reacting to that sort of thing very well. Whatever your executive functioning skills aren't where they potentially could be, or if they're not being properly supported, then, you know, people can really give you grief about some of these things at times, and that can have a tremendous impact on your self-worth. So the reason we're talking about them so much is because these things mean a lot. They're things that we know that they've happened to us as a staff team, they've happened to the people that we support. So this is why we're trying to really impress upon others that these things actually don't have an impact on your self-worth at all. If we don't take after ourselves, if we don't look after ourselves, then there's a few things that are more likely to happen. So situational mutism, if we don't look after ourselves, then we're more likely to be experiencing situational mutism, which is something that we talk about quite commonly on our social media, because quite a few of us in the staff team experience it quite a lot. And as someone who experiences situational mutism, it definitely happens more whenever I'm not taking care of myself. We're more likely to lead to crisis points. And whenever we say crisis points, we mean meltdowns, shutdowns, elopement, masking, people pleasing, fawning, that kind of thing as well. These are far more common if we don't look after ourselves. Autistic burnout, which happens after you've had quite a lot of crisis points, very often in a short, relatively close period of time. Decreased sense of well-being, poorer mental and physical health. The impact that it can have on your sleep is tremendous. And whenever you are not sleeping well, then that can have a huge impact on all of these other things as well. So, poor sleep leads to a decrease of your general sense of well-being and everything else too. It can have an impact on the way that you experience your emotions as well. And you're much more likely to negative self-talk yourself if you're not looking after yourself properly. And small reframing, we'll talk about that, can come in. And it can actually lead to changes to the physical structure of your brain if you don't look after yourself enough. So that's definitely something that we really want to encourage people to be doing as much as humanly possible. Emma?
Yeah.
Oh, me, John?
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, coming back to that sort of subject of well-being, because we've been sort of talking about that a little bit already. So basically, there are 8 sort of parts of our well-being that we can kind of talk about, and I find that quite helpful. I sort of learned about this when I was at university, and we had input from a counsellor there who was kind of helping us to support children in class, but also ourselves as teachers. It was a very demanding job at the time. So it was about thinking about each of these different areas and how you could break it down a wee bit. And again, I think as an autistic person, we will talk about challenges of self-care as an autistic person, but for me, certainly sometimes it can be a case of, well, I just feel a bit off, but I'm not sure why. I feel like I'm doing all the right things, but yet something's missing. And sometimes going through this almost as a kind of check sheet type thing is like, actually, I realize that there's maybe been areas I've been neglecting, and that can sometimes be why I have got that sort of decreased sense of well-being in certain aspects. So physical, that's probably quite an obvious one. We've sort of touched on that already, but that's taking care of your body and all of its functions. And as I say, we will give examples in the next couple of slides. Emotional is being able to cope effectively with life. So being able to sort of handle challenges that come at us, as they always do. Some people might use the word resilience. I don't always know if that's the best word, but being able to sort of adapt to things that are happening, and having healthy relationships, so both with yourself and with other people. So it's that kind of self-perception, how you see yourself, how you talk to yourself, and also then your relationship with other people. Social is that sort of wider connection, so having a sense of connection to other people, having a sense of belonging, and having good support systems that you can turn to. Again, as autistic people, that can be, also part of that is like having neurodivergent sort of support systems, and being part of that community. Intellectual, so that's thinking about how you recognize and develop your skills and knowledge, so being aware of what your strengths are. Again, that kind of feeds back into that self-worth thing a lot, and being able to sort of work on those. Spiritual, that sounds like maybe a bit of a funny one, because obviously not everyone's particularly good to identify as spiritual or have a religion, but that can also just mean having a sense of purpose or meaning in life, and that could sort of refer to a whole different aspects of things, not just sort of the kind of religious things you might think of. Environmental, so that's about the spaces that you inhabit and being in spaces that are promoting your well-being, making you feel good. And again, as autistic people, I think that one is really particularly important for us, sort of from a sensory perspective. Occupational, so that's that part about having job or work that you do that is satisfying or rewarding. And as I said, it doesn't have to be a job in the kind of traditional sense that you might think of, but having things that you do each day that you find rewarding and meaningful. And then finally, financially, so taking steps towards financial stability, both at the present and in terms of thinking about your future as well. That sounds like a bit of a heavy going one to think about as well. And obviously sometimes there are situations where, you know, obviously that there can be a lot of elements that are out with our control, but it's about, as far as possible, is trying to manage that responsibly.
It can really help sort of, I know this is one of the things that we're going to talk about as well, is to kind of think, what can I control? And sort of accepting the things that you can control, accepting the things that you can't, and then really focusing on what it is that you can do something about, and then working with people who can help you with the others as well, isn't that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've got some examples in practice, because we always like to give a good example. We always want people to feel empowered and like there's something that they can do, something that they can take away. And yeah, those who were here, those who have signed up for the webinar will get these slides. So don't worry, you don't have to go scribbling everything down. But physical things, you know, as we said, you know, getting enough sleep is absolutely key. Drinking enough water is something that I have often struggled to do in the past. So I know those of you who are sort of familiar with our organization will know that one of the things I've done to make sure that I do that is using a water bottle that really appeals to me. I was really fortunate. A really lovely, very good friend of mine sent me this water bottle with Grogu on it. So obviously it's the only water bottle that I want to use alongside my DuckTales water bottle. And knowing that Grogu is there and looking at me, and it says, my child can levitate your child, and things. So, you know, it's got a little bit of humor on it. That makes it a lot more accessible to me. That makes it much more interesting for me to be using this. So I'm far more likely to use it because I'm actually going ahead and doing it. And with hygiene, a lovely, lovely friend of ours shared, and we do have permission to share this story. They shared that when they were younger, they hated taking baths. But if it was a Pokemon bubble bath, now that was different. That was what got them into the bath. So using those special interests to get you into these places can sometimes be really, really, really handy at helping us to do some of these physical ones. Stress reduction can be incredibly hard. That can be a really difficult one, but you might have to sort of take a step back and think, what are the things that are actually causing me stress? And, you know, what is it that I'm actually able to do about it? And it can be really handy to have some help to figure these things out. You know, I think a lot of the time we do want to be self-reliant, and we sometimes might feel like we're a burden if we're relying on others to help, but we're really not. We're absolutely deserve to get that help and that support. So if there is somebody who can support you with that thing, that's absolutely necessary. Yeah. I think having healthy relationships and those setting boundaries can be really difficult. If you've been a people pleaser for a long time and people expect you to be going that extra mile for them an awful lot, when you suddenly start putting in boundaries, that's when a lot of us who are autistic really do find out who our friends are. You know, a good friend, somebody who really respects you will be happy that you have recognized that you need to put up a boundary, and they'll support you in putting up that boundary, and they will respect that boundary. Someone who doesn't care about your well-being is far more likely to trespass over your boundaries. And it can be really difficult putting these things up, but it genuinely is one of the best things that you can do for your self-care. It's ensuring that the people that you're spending time with, the people that you're socializing with, these two do link in quite well, are people that give you energy rather than sap your energy, right? And it has to be a give and take in relationships, absolutely. But you've got to be around people who are making you feel better, who are helping you to feel connected with others, who are providing a strong network for you. And it's okay if people go through like a hard time and you're maybe giving them a little bit more support than usual, if you know that they're going to do the same back for you. But if you can honestly say that they're going to do that, then it's good to sometimes reevaluate some of these things. And I think as well, taking part socially, and I think this is where I really love our lunch clubs, because we see people coming along and socializing in such a free space where they don't have those concerns about being judged for being who they are, which is really, really good. Knowing when you need alone time, I know, do you know what, as a parent, I completely understand that is really hard to get sometimes. But one of the best things, and again, I have permission from my family to share this, one of the best things that we instituted in my family was that at lunchtime, I get to go away and do my own thing. So my husband and my son might have some lunch together, and I'm off in a completely different room, usually watching Star Trek and doing something entirely different from the rest of them. So I've got that time out to do my own thing, and it really does make a huge big difference. And I think those intellectual, those creative activities, somebody who really likes to draw, I'm not particularly good at drawing, but I really enjoy it. And when I get those opportunities to go that and do and be creative, I love that feeling. And that getting to spend time on a special interest and develop, those interests really do make me feel so much better. Spending time on a hobby or a special interest or doing something creative actively gives me energy in a way that very few other things do. And if you can do something that's going to help you to feel actively energized afterwards, that's so good for you, isn't it?
Definitely. I think it's like the life energy of autistic people, isn't it?
I know.
New facts.
See, very often around about Autistic Pride in the past, we've done things where we've just let people come along and talk about their special interests. And oh my, it is just beautiful. I don't even thinking about them now, I'm feeling a bit more energized than I was before. But yeah, rather than talk about them, let's talk about some of the other things that we can do. So you can have a wee week through some of these, Maya.
Yeah. So starting off with the spiritual ones, again, as I say, that might be involving or still actually spiritual or religious practices or activities if you have one, and if that's things that are sort of like do improve your sense of well-being, that can be really important. But it's exploring your identity overall, and so part of that is your values, your beliefs. We were chatting about this before, and I think even just learning about autism and like the autistic community, I think that can be part of it, sort of feeling like you're connected to something that's larger than you, knowing that there's other people out there, having that like-minded community. So there are like crossovers between quite a few of these, so that could also be feeding into social, and that's quite the good thing about some of these things is actually you can sort of tick a few boxes at once when you're doing certain activities. Also, something else that I think quite a lot of autistic people speak about is having that sort of connection with nature. For me, like I just love being outside. I would be outside all the time if I could be. And I think it's this idea that in nature, it's this kind of space where there is no right and wrong. There is no one way of being. The concept of neurodiversity reflects that biodiversity that you find outside. What was that I read somewhere? It's like there's no such thing as a straight line in nature. So like, it's just a place where I think people can be much more at peace with themselves, more accepting of themselves, and the kind of sensory elements that come with that as well, I think can be so important. We've also put helping others in need here. I guess that comes with a bit of a side note that helping others can be really important to autistic people. Again, I think it's that strong sense of justice we often have. We really want to help out fellow underdogs. If we see someone that's being treated unfairly, we want to help out. But that can also, in that kind of way that we do everything 100%, sometimes that can become quite a big sap of our energy. So it is finding a balance. It's going back to remembering that you need to take care of yourself before you take care of anyone else. And if you're putting other people's needs before yours, then that's possibly when you need to maybe step back from certain, relationships or situations. But definitely, I think helping others in need, it can be something that really gives a lot of meaning and sort of comes under that sort of spiritual heading. Environmental, so as we said, it can be really important again for autistic people. That's sort of how in tune we feel with our environment. Keeping your home tidy, put at the top of here. I just come back from being in Shetland, as I said, for a few days, and my home was not tidy when I got home. And I actually found that I had to go and reset everything before I could sit down and feel like I could concentrate. I very much lose my sense of like focus if I don't, know where things are and so on and so forth. But in general, it is one that some people can struggle with. But I think it's certainly that part of, taking care for your environment. It makes you feel like, that it's kind of an extension of you to an extent. And it hopefully, it doesn't have to be this ultra pristine place, But if it works for you, you know where things are, you're not climbing over clutter to get to things in the morning. You know, it doesn't need to be something completely unobtainable. Spending time outside, as I said, that can be like a really good environment to be in anyway. Having a calm home environment. So it might not even just be physically your house, but what's the atmosphere? How are you sharing that space with other people? Marion was talking about certain times of the day, you might split up from your family a little bit, so you've got your own space within that. And then things like also being outside, it's things like, getting vitamin D from the sun, having natural light on you for parts of the day. That can all be really sort of regulating for the nervous system, and then, positively impact you in different ways. Occupational. So having work or tasks or jobs that you find rewarding. Also really important here, which I think a few of us have probably been guilty of not quite having in place sometimes, is having a good work-life balance. So even, I think, again, autistic people, when we're doing a job that we utterly love, and especially if that job is tied into our special interests, it can be hard knowing when to stop. So when I was teaching, I would, I think it was also part of just that kind of career, but when I was teaching, I'd do my day of teaching, but also then come home and spend 3, 4, 5 hours planning lessons, marking, all the things, reading on how I could be a better teacher. And it was so, like, it took over my life so much. And it was, I think, one of the biggest things that's been most important to me, and I think potentially the COVID pandemic really helped me move away from it, was getting that like work-life balance and being really protective of my time that's out with work. So having sort of routines around, the workday's finished, and that's changed for me now that I work at home as well. It can still be really challenging, but having routines in place that I know when to stop, I know when it's enough that day, and making sure that there's other things in life that are giving me motivation and meaning. Because I think for a long time, work for me was like the one thing I had. And I think when we put all of our kind of self-worth in one pot, it means that if something goes wrong there, that affects our entire identity. So if I was struggling at work, I'd feel like I was a failure as a person because I didn't have anything else going that was going positively.
But I do want to point out that I will actively encourage my staff to clock off on time. And I do try and be the boss, the manager that's always like, how's your work-life balance? Yeah, you're not working too, yeah, good. Finish on time, please, everyone.
And it's so, as I say, it's so hard because we love our jobs, but yeah, getting that balance is important. Exploring career opportunities that you're passionate about. So again, that's not necessarily saying you need to be climbing a career ladder and get to the top, get the big wage packet, but just having a job that you enjoy, and if there's skills, strengths you have that you feel could be used in a career, thinking about how you could use them. And that kind of comes under that thing of having goals as well. So it doesn't need to be tied to income or anything like that, but just, how could I use my full set of skills and find stuff that I really enjoy doing. And then finally, financial. So things like having a budget, understanding what you have each month to spend, keeping an eye on your spending, paying your bills on time, and asking for help. I guess this kind of comes under every column, but asking for help if you need it, if you are struggling with money. There's lots of people out there that can help with that. If you have debt, again, there's people that can help with that, and trying to stay on top of things in a way that's, healthy. I know that like in the current financial climate, this is like a really big one, and it's probably like a topic for another day because it can be like a really anxiety inducing topic, but it is worth keeping in mind that obviously it is something that impacts how well you feel day to day. Oh, Marion, are you on mute?
Sure. I think it doesn't help that it's so easy to spend money these days. And so many online talks there, shall we just save your card details for next time? And sort of choosing that, no, I'm not going to save my card details, has absolutely helped with that sort of thing, but yeah, I think you're right. I think we could spend an entire day just talking about that sort of thing, didn't we? Yeah.
I think with I guess with folk that maybe have like an ADHD sort of profile as well, that kind of there's a sort of certain like spending sort of risk around spending and things like that. So yeah, I think that it's a lot of relevant points we could go into on that as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about why self-care might be quite difficult for a lot of autistic people, but we are going to come up with some other strategies as well. We've talked about a few strategies going to do, but we've got some other strategies for combating this, why it could be difficult. So a lot of these are quite self-explanatory. So I'll just have a look at some of those ones that might be a wee bit trickier to get through. When we talk about interoceptive differences, we're talking about that sense of what's going on inside your body, interoception. And lots and lots of autistic people do struggle to recognize what's going on inside their own body. I'm just back after a couple of months of medical leave, which was very restful an awful lot of the time. But there were mornings where I would be sitting and maybe engrossed in watching a TV show or reading a book or something. And my husband would come into the room and he would say, "How are you doing just now, Marion?" And then as soon as he said that, my concentration from what I was doing would be broken. And then that would be the first time that I would notice that I was hungry, I was thirsty, and I needed to go to the toilet. I needed to do all three. And if he didn't get out of the way, then I would eventually plow into him because it was going to take me time to get off the couch and move anyway. Right. But these difficulties with recognizing what's going on inside our own body can make it difficult for us to recognize that we need to do self-care in the first place. But yeah, we will talk about some ways of doing it. Levels of executive functioning. I mean, my executive functioning capabilities vary wildly from the start of the day to the finish of the day. Start of today, they were pretty good. This is the end of quite a long day for me. So I'm not expecting my executive functioning to be up to much at all until at least tomorrow. I'm done with executive functioning after we're finished with the webinar. Negative self-talk is such a difficult thing. Although I did see something on social media earlier on today, because social media can be useful for these things, where somebody started talking about, instead of calling themselves stupid, they started calling themselves silly instead. So rather than, "Oh, I've been so stupid doing that," "Oh, I was so silly doing that." And if that sort of thing can make such a massive sensory overload. You know, I'm sure a lot of you are really, really familiar with changes to the routine can feel really, really difficult. Alexithymia is, one of those other big words that we sort of bandy around within the autistic community a lot. And it basically means it's like difficulties with interoception, but with your emotions instead of your body. So you have these emotions, you have these feelings, and it's sometimes really difficult to pin down what exactly that emotion is. So something might happen, and the response could be, "Am I upset about this? Am I excited about it? Am I annoyed? Am I frustrated? Am I happy? How exactly do I feel about this?" And I think the problem is that sometimes we're complex human beings. So we don't necessarily have just one reaction to something. We have lots of different reactions. You might be feeling anxious and relieved at the same time. So sometimes it can be really difficult to pick through those things. So that can be a barrier to self-care for some of us as well. Feeling like a demand is a really, really difficult one. And earlier on this year, we were talking online with some people about demand avoidance. And somebody said that fresh fruit is a demand. And I absolutely agree with them. I have fresh fruit in my house because I know that's a good way of me taking care of myself. Fresh fruit has a use by date. That is a demand. And it's one of the reasons why I very often have fusty oranges in my fruit bowl. Not that I don't I love them. I absolutely adore them. But knowing I have to eat them by a certain time is a demand. And that sometimes is a barrier to me actually using and eating them. Frozen fruit, however, completely different. You can eat it anytime. That's much more accessible to me because it doesn't have so much of a demand. So these things can be really, really difficult. Social difficulties, if you're trying to look after yourself socially, and financial difficulties, as we've already covered, can be really big. Autistic inertia, what's that, right? Autistic inertia can be the difficulty in getting started doing something. So it's when you're lying on the couch and you know you need to clean up, but you just can't get off that couch. It's not procrastination, it's not laziness, it's just, I don't even know where to start. How do I even begin this? And then that can lead to, a whole lot of negative self-talk. I'm just being lazy. Why can't I? Why can't I? And then if you've got other people in the house who then say, why can't you? Why can't you? Autistic inertia. And that can be really, really difficult to overcome at times. But autistic inertia is also finding it really difficult to stop doing something. I genuinely really like dusting and I really like hoovering. I like doing both of them. The problem is I can't dust just one room and I can't hoover just one room very often, because once I start, I feel like I need to do the whole lot of it. So if I could, dusting one place or dusting one room or hoovering one room would be one thing, but that's quite a difficult thing to achieve for some autistic people who maybe then would find it difficult to stop after that one. Does that make sense, Emma? Yeah.
Definitely. I think I got in, Anne was giving me into trouble yesterday, day before. I had my dinner at Anne's and I went to wash my plate and then there were more dishes there and I couldn't help myself but doing them all. And Anne was like, Emma, no, you don't need to do my dishes. But it wasn't even a choice. If I start a task, like any sort of cleaning related task, I'm off. I will keep going until it's done. And
and that's autistic inertia in practice.
It's that thing of, the ball starts rolling and until it comes to the end. So
yeah, Anne told me that I should have you as a house guest though, just exactly for that reason.
For that reason, you can come and visit anytime you want,
got
Emma.
a free pass.
We have a wee example of executive functioning here, Emma, about why it might be sort of difficult and sort of why it can be an issue. Do you want to talk us through some of this?
Yeah, because I think this sort of taps into that autistic inertia thing as well, of like, why are some tasks so hard to get started? And I think for neurotypical people, some of these things might seem really insignificant, and it's like they might not understand why for us it is such a hard thing to do. But so the example here we've got is the task: I haven't eaten all day and now I eat a meal. So perhaps you've been busy at work, you've maybe been in sort of hyper focus mode, you've not had those interceptive cues that you're feeling hungry. All of a sudden you stop, you realize it's dark outside. Oh, I haven't eaten today. So the first problem is the sink is full of dishes. I can't actually make a meal because all my dirt, all my plates or all my, knives are all dirty. I'm gonna have to, and then the next one, I have nothing to cook with until I wash those things up. So even before you can choose the meal, which for me takes a long time, deciding what I want to eat, check to see if you've got the ingredients in the fridge, check to see the ingredients haven't gone off, collect them. Before you can even start any of that, you need the tools first. So that can be completely overwhelming. And if you're already hungry and maybe tired because there's a whole maybe some other needs, physical needs that you've not been tending to that day, that can be really difficult. That can be like, that's when the inertia hits. You might actually sit for an hour thinking about all these things before you can get yourself off the couch and go, no, but I actually need to eat. So a solution that I actually did today at lunchtime, I didn't order pizza, but I ordered a burrito. I'll order food in, I'll order something that's quick, that way I don't need to do my dishes, I don't need to cook, and I'm fed, good. Maybe, there's the financial implication, but I'm fed. But there are other problems associated with that. Tomorrow, the same task is going to be there. The dishes will still be in the sink. I'm still going to have to decide what I want to eat. Maybe, it'll be breakfast time. I'll need to get something else. And you come back to that same problem again. So, it might be that ordering the food serves, your immediate short-term need, but you're not really coming to a long-term solution. And we're going to kind of talk about that short versus long-term problem solving in a wee bit. So solution, could I order pizza again the next day? Could I order in my breakfast? There's been days where that's happened in this household. But, it doesn't solve the problem. And actually, it's also potentially creating a new problem as well. You're not going to be fulfilling your nutritional needs if you're constantly relying on takeaway food. You're probably going to be burning through a fair bit of money if you're, using Deliveroo. And that sink is still full, and there's probably a bit of a smell now developing in the house, which is possibly impacting your well-being as well. So you can see how these things can really build up. And if you're sort of still over at problem one, sitting on the sofa thinking about, oh gosh, what do I do? You might have ran through this whole list of sort of things in your mind. And again, it can be really overwhelming.
It can be really overwhelming, can't it? And I think, again, back when you used to have to phone up places to order food in, I'm sure I ordered pizza far less often whenever I had to do a phone call.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I could go online or use an app and just go tap, 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 that's it done. It is so much easier to do that. And that is downright dangerous for some people, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
That's like part of sort of the bigger problem, isn't it? Is that there's so many things that have been appified and made so easy, but it's not always the best choices that are then, the easiest. And of course, it's the thing as well of, if I can order groceries to my house, do I need to leave the house? Do I need to move my body? There's a whole host of sort of things that sort of short-term easy solution can impact longer down the line.
I've never heard the word appified before, but it's absolutely my new favorite word now. I think I'm gonna use it constantly. So yeah, let's get on to empowering people and giving you some of their strategies for self-care as well. Right. One thing that I personally have found really, really beneficial is reframing that problem. So if you go into the kitchen and go, oh, I need to clean the kitchen. For me, I think that's really difficult. But I want to clean the kitchen because I will feel better when it's done is so much better. Right. Because then that's focusing on how it's going to make you feel whenever it's done, rather than you feeling overwhelmed at the thought of having to do it. I want to go outside because fresh air helps me clear my head versus I should go outside. I should go outside is a demand. I want to go outside is more of a desire, which is far easier for those of us who are demand avoidant for doing. I want to pay my bills because I won't have to worry about being in debt versus I need to pay my bills. I need to pay my bills with something that I really, really struggled with. And I do remember today I paid my car tax. And I felt proper good whenever I paid it. Another thing that we kind of haven't put on here that's also been really helpful for me and my family is I might as well. So I'm going upstairs, so I might as well just take up that hoodie that I took off. I'm going back downstairs, so I might as well take down the used toilet rolls. So I'm not collecting a little graveyard of used toilet rolls upstairs in the bathroom. Yeah. I'm going through to the kitchen, so I might as well take through the empty cup. I'm going back through to the living room, so I might as well. Yeah. So that little might as well really helps. I'm going to the toilet before I go to bed, so I might as well brush my teeth while I'm in the bathroom. So that might as well does make a huge big difference at times. So reframing, so that you're saying that I'm doing something because it's beneficial to me, is really, really handy. And, I'm already walking to the kitchen anyway. That's just one extra thing in my hand. That's not as big a demand, is it? Yeah.
It's like rather than negative self-talk, it's the motivational self-talk.
Yeah. And it does make a difference. I mean, it's a wee thing, but just remembering to do it does make a big difference. Yeah. Right. You've got a few more, haven't you?
Yeah, so we've got a few more here, and I think actually some of them we've kind of touched on already. But yeah, one thing kind of really wanted to emphasize to start with was, we've talked about there being these 8 sort of aspects of well-being. I think that can be really overwhelming, and especially if you're at a stage where you're actually struggling with various aspects of your well-being. If you've been going through quite a difficult situation, it can be really hard to know where to start or feel like, oh my goodness, there's just so many things I need to do. And, you're back in that situation of, okay, I won't do any of them then. So what we'd always suggest is really just focus on 1 or 2 things at a time, thinking about what do I want to prioritize first. And even when you're at a situation in your life when, you are doing really well, you feel really regulated, you're just on the ball with things, like well-being is something you have to always work on. It's, I was thinking earlier, when I used to talk about it and think about it in terms of, if anyone plays The Sims, and you have like all the different health bars, the types of health bar. And I'd imagine walking around and like having these different bars above my head and being like, oh, need to fill that one up, right? Go and do that. And somehow like telling Sims like how to do their self-care is easier than doing our self-care, as a side note. But anyway, it's realizing you can only really do one or two of those things at once. And, you know, there's times where you might want to focus more of your energy on some specific ones where you maybe feel like you've maybe neglected them in the past before. So yeah, at any sort of stage, probably having one or two where you're really focusing your energy, I think that could be a good place to start and help to make it feel a bit less overwhelming. Creating new habits or routines. So I am all about a routine. And again, it doesn't need to be that, you know, and I think you'll probably almost set yourself up for failure if you go, right, tomorrow I'm going to do like all of these things, and you have this huge to-do list, and it actually can be really overwhelming and just really difficult to start with. So still going with that, just change one or two things at a time with the plan. But yeah, starting new routines. So get up, and, you know, the first thing you do that morning maybe is, I mean, brush your teeth, have a drink of water. Like right away, you're taking care of some of your physical needs. I usually have like a huge drink of water right at the start of the day, because, you know, it sets me up. I'm like, okay, at least I've got half of my litre out of my 2 litres today out of the way. I'm hydrated after I've had my sleep. Even just little things like that as a starting point, doing that each day can be really like have a really big effect. Routines for me as well are things the fact that, you know, I have my dog that I walk 3 times a day at very specific times of the day, and it means that I'm getting outside, I'm moving around, I'm spending time outside with him. Even when I was at Anne's on my on my wee visit there, I still went out at the same times anyway to have a walk, just because it's part of my habit. And there's also, I mean, there's lots of sort of books and things out there about how, you know, habits can really be supportive to well-being. So I can maybe chat about some of that at the end if anyone's interested. Noticing your needs and wants in the first place. So obviously, again, that's a skill in itself. You know, taking the time to run through those things in your head, those kind of areas, and thinking about, you know, is there things I'm missing here? Am I so busy that I'm maybe not noticing, again, you know, things during the day? If I'm really busy, am I ignoring some of my needs? Being self-aware of that. Scheduling activities ahead of time. So again, you know, things like having a timetable, having a diary, you know, visit the dentist. That's a really good one. My dentist always books me in for like the next 6 months ahead when I leave. So like I don't leave without the next appointment in place, and then it's in my diary. So like I'm making sure I'm getting that. Having an accountability partner or buddy. So that's that thing of like, you know, having someone basically within your support system that is checking in on you, you know, asking, have you remembered to eat today, if it's something you struggle with. It might be something like going to the gym or having a walk after work. It might be that one of your colleagues or a friend meets you, and if you know that you're meeting them at a certain time and place, there's a lot more sort of likelihood that you're actually going to go and do the thing if you can do it with someone.
We do quite often do that as a staff team as well, don't we? Have you been to the toilet in the last 2 hours? Have you had a drink?
Everyone's so much more basic. It's like, have you?
Yeah. You have gone to get lunch today? Yes. You know, yeah. And I think just having someone check in like that, that's actually really helped, doesn't it? And the fact that we're doing it for each other. So it's not like one of us do, or all of us doing it for one. We're all doing it together. I think that makes a really big difference.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think my partner's like excellent with me for reminding me to do certain things or to not do certain things as well. So like when I'm stressed, I can pick at my skin and stuff a lot, and usually he'll kind of go like, he'll come and point out to me. He'll be like, you're picking at your face, you don't seem well regulated, like what is it? Do you need to eat? Do you need to go and have a bath? Like, do you need to just go and sit with the dog? Like, you know, he'll help me sort of to guide me to what it is I might need. So, but it doesn't have to be, you know, a partner. It can be anyone that you sort of trust and have that relationship with. Increasing or decreasing convenience. So increasing the convenience is something for me that's like, again, keep using this example of water, but I always have my water bottle in front of me like at all times. So like I see it, physically see it, I remember I need to drink. And it's so much easier because it's right there. In terms of food, like again, this doesn't work for everyone, but like I will spend time on a Sunday meal prepping for the week. So it's a kind of thing of like, it's a routine, but it also increases convenience. So then I've got like 5 lunches set out in Tupperware. And when it gets to the, day to day, if I'm busy, if I lose track of time, it doesn't matter because my lunch is there. I just take out the fridge and I know that I've got something decently nutritious there. I'm not going to make a sort of in the moment bad decision about my food. Because I wasn't here this weekend, that's why I got a takeaway today. But then on the flip side, so decreasing convenience. So, if there's things that are sort of less, good for your well-being, it's making those less easy to access. So, for my partner, it's like not buying chocolate and having it in the house because it'll all get eaten very, very, very quickly. Or just, putting things a bit more out of way. The other good one as well is like, if you're thinking about going for a walk, like, I don't know, putting on your shoes at the start of the day so you're ready to leave the house means that it's one less step when it gets to that time. Identifying and addressing negative beliefs. So this is kind of one of those ones where, it's so much easier said than done. And I think this comes back to the point of like, for a lot of these things, actually it is that you might need to seek some support with these things. So it might be that counselling or therapy or something like that is going to be what you need to help work on these things. Even just, again, going back to being part of the autistic community, I think we provide so much support to one another and through some of the different groups we do as well. So that can help with that kind of thing. And when you have that good ingrained sense of self-worth and you're positively talking yourself up, like you were saying about the kind of I might as well sort of thing, I think that can that can be really helpful. I really enjoyed recently Harry Thompson PDA was talking about his experience running the London Marathon, and he said he was getting really emotional because sort of at these big running events, often people will have their name like on their chest on the running bib. So like within the crowds that are watching you, you'll often get folk that are like, yeah, come on, like go on Harry, you look great, you've got this. And like he was saying, he realized like it was kind of like the opposite of what he often hears in his head. So it's like, and like it was just positive self-talk, like actually in practice, and he was realizing like he needs to do that for himself more. So yeah, having that inner like
It just reminds me, that talk to yourself like your own best friend. It's like it's exactly the same thing. Yeah, having that externalized. Yeah. But yeah, I saw that whenever I've seen marathons as well. My husband ran a marathon, and people were saying, "Go on, Beardy," whenever he was running, which was just lovely, and it really does make a huge big difference. And if that's the difference that externalized can make, then having it internalized, I think, can be very much more powerful at times, can't it? Yeah,
definitely. So I feel like we sometimes, it's like, do we say it enough to like one another of like, yeah, you got this, well done, like just like, and then how that helps that person sort of speak to themselves in that way as well. Pairing activities, so I think that's what you were talking about, Marion, already about, if I'm doing one thing, can I just do something else at the same time? So like if I take my dog out for a walk, I might as well take the bin bags down as well. 2 things off, one, 2 birds, 1 stone. Using distractions or special interests to make tasks more interesting. Lots of different ways you could apply that. And then just remembering that actually doing 1% of a task, completing 1% of a task is better than doing 0% or none at all. So it is just that thing of building up small changes every day can lead to actually much bigger changes. But if you try to do something massive at once, either it's so much harder to start, or it can sometimes be really hard to maintain drastic changes. So yeah, just starting small and sort of also making sure that you give yourself a pat on the back when you are able to do those small things.
Yeah. I think rewards and treats can be one of those things that, I don't like it if somebody says, oh, if you do X and then you'll get a reward. No thanks to that. But whenever I decide, if I do this, then I am going to treat myself with Y, then that's a different thing, because that's me choosing to do that rather than having that choice foisted upon me. So I would never sort of say to my child, for example, if you do X, then we will do Y. because I don't think that externalized motivation for somebody else is necessarily very good. But me choosing to do that is still an internal motivator. So that I see that as a kind of different way. So I don't want other people rewarding or treating me. I want to do it myself. I take control of that narrative there, right? Isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
I do need to work on reminding myself that 1% of a task is better than 0%. Absolutely. Every time. So yeah, we thought we should have a wee look at self-soothing as well. So something that's self-soothing is a short-term solution that will probably make you feel better in the moment, but it's not necessarily going to help you feel long-term better. And some of these are things that we absolutely do need to be doing, and some of these are not harmful at all in any way, shape, or form. And some of those maybe aren't quite so healthy for us. So we haven't really put them in any kind of order because we know that, everybody has their own kind of things. But, having a little bit of junk food is fine. Binge eating, maybe not quite so. Having a little bit of junk food every day, not quite so fine. But, as a short term, I've had a really bad day. I've not had a bar of chocolate for like 3 months. I've not had a bar of chocolate for 2 weeks. I've not had a bar of chocolate all week, whatever. That's not necessarily harmful, but having it every day for self-soothing isn't necessarily great. Binge watching TV, somebody who's a frequent TV binge watcher, it's not necessarily bad. It's not helping me long term unless it's, like a special interest, but it's not a bad thing to do. Supporting sensory wants is self-soothing, and it's definitely not a bad thing to do. I don't, necessarily have to be stimming at this particular moment in time, but I want to, and so that's what I'm doing. So I've got a little key ring with another Grogu thing actually that I'm fidgeting with, and that's really helping, and that's lovely. Don't need to be doing it, but it's helping me feel good right now, so I'm doing it. Pampering, nothing wrong with a little bit of pampering at all. Spending money if you've got the money to spend, absolutely fine. Skipping meals is something that some of these people do, right? Well, if I skip this meal, then I don't have to worry about the dishes. I don't need to worry about X, Y, and Z. Long term, not necessarily very, very good. A little bit of alcohol, and if you are a drinker, in moderation, it's absolutely fine. But if you're relying on alcohol or drugs to get you through a day as self-soothing, not great at all. That's definitely something that people would be better to get hold of. Doom scrolling, oh my goodness, who else spent most of the pandemic doom scrolling? Because that for sure was me. And I know an awful lot of people who very, very sensibly decided that they were going to turn off the notifications on news apps. And I don't know how often I've almost done that, but kind of nearly done that. But sometimes in the short term, it makes you feel better because, oh my goodness, at least my life isn't like that. But, it's still... Is it good for your mental health to be doing that all the time? No. Posting on social media for validation. If I post this picture, 5 people might like it, and then I'm going to feel better about myself. But is it something that I want to post? Is it something I'm happy with the world knowing? What exactly am I getting out of this? And physical contact as well. And, physical contact can come in, like an awful lot of different forms. It could be just like hugging, it could be kissing, it could be sex, it could be, even just like brushing past somebody in the shop or something. And again, a lot of physical contact, sometimes you could argue that some of that is actually self-care, and sometimes it's self-soothing. It can be could be a mixture of the both, to be honest, quite a lot of the time. And again, nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it's just self-soothing rather than actual self-care. And there is nothing wrong with self-soothing generally. As long as you're doing things in moderation and you're being healthy about it, nothing wrong with self-soothing. And I think, it's something that we should all feel a little bit better about, recognizing this is something that does make me feel good. But am I doing it in a healthy way? Am I still maintaining healthy habits while I'm doing these sort of things? Is a really, really important one. So yeah, I think some days I can't see the chat properly. You guys have been properly chatty, and I love it, and I can't wait to have a proper read. But yeah, self-care is about boundaries. I think that's a really good one. Yeah. So recognizing what is the boundary in this here, and maintaining some of those good ones, because self-soothing is good, but we do need to be sort of watching boundaries with some of these aspects of self-soothing, not all of them. It's a really difficult one though, isn't it, Emma? It's not clear cut, is it?
I think it's not everything in balance thing, isn't it? Because, there's so many things that Even in that list of things we're saying, these things are good and positive for your well-being. So many of them, actually, if you do it too much, like that, it ends up sort of being negative eventually as well, like too much of anything.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that about most stims.
Yeah.
Be one of those ones that I would be like, yes, stim away to your heart's content, she says, while stimming, as she has been doing all day.
So yeah, thinking about the pros and cons of self-soothing. So benefits and sort of costs. So pros, they can meet your immediate needs, and as a result of that, you can sometimes feel better almost instantly. They're almost sort of intrinsically enjoyable. I would think that, if it's self-soothing, it is something that's enjoyable, relaxing. And one other thing that is really worth thinking about as well is that actually some self-soothing can mean that, it's just that little boost that's actually making you feel in a better place to practice self-care in the first place. So if there's a sort of level of energy required in order for you to sort of take that first step to do something, sometimes it is just that the short-term fix can actually be that little boost. So getting a takeaway today for my lunch, for example, like it was a kind of short-term solution, but it meant I was able to sort of take care of some other things that needed to get done. And it actually meant that I didn't get overwhelmed, because all of a sudden I didn't also had to cook as well. I was able to eat and then move on and do the next thing. They can help improve your mood. It can give you a little break from responsibilities, so have a great night out partying with friends, have a few drinks, you can sort of just take that sort of off time to sort of recharge potentially. And often it might not require too much effort. So yeah, as I said, if your kind of energy levels are quite low, it's not something that has a huge cost attached to it in terms of how much effort you put in. But the sort of potential downsides can be a lot of these things might not be satisfying long-term needs. So it's going back to that idea of like, dirty kitchen, ordering food in. The longer term need there is that there's a bit more management needed of the environment. So going to that short-term fix every day isn't going to fix that. And instant gratification really generally doesn't last. So you might get that sort of wee hit of something in all manner of different ways, but that's not going to give you that sort of longer term overall sense of well-being. It can lead to some unhealthy habits starting. So if you are relying on these things every day, junk food, great. We used to do a sort of Friday night takeaway. That was like our little treat at the end of the week, especially during lockdown. It was kind of like, well, can't spend our money anywhere else. But if that had sort of fallen into like happening every night, financially that wouldn't be great. In terms of our health, that probably wouldn't be great either. So yeah, and anything can be, especially for me anyway, things can become a habit very quickly. So it's being careful that it's kind of like the sort of 80-20 rule of like 80% of the time I'm choosing the good things, and 20% of the time I'll have like an indulgence or whatever. And it can increase your need for self-care in the long term. So for example, if it was something like alcohol, drugs, if you're sort of overly relying on something like that, you're probably going to then be, for that sort of short term sort of positive effect, actually paying for it in the longer term. There's going to be physical health impacts, again, financial, potentially social, emotional. So yeah, it's actually like sort of putting you further back. It might not work every time either. So if you're relying on bubble bath and wine all the time to feel better, but actually what's really bothering you is that you maybe have a certain relationship with a friend or partner or something where you've got quite unhealthy boundaries, and they're being overstepped a lot, there's no amount of bubble baths are gonna solve that problem. And sometimes it will make you feel better, but actually if it really is quite like a deeper problem that's not being addressed, it's not going to work every time for you. You might also experience guilt around certain behaviors as well. So again, that might be linked to things like, certain things you're eating. You might feel like, I've overindulged. I should have spent that money. I should have bought that, shopping. I shouldn't have bought those things. I regret this now. So in the moment, it felt good, but actually afterwards, you can feel a bit, ashamed about the decisions you've made. And then that's only going to add on to that kind of, decreased sense of self-worth, feeling less inclined to do those other sort of well-being those self-care things. And of course, our responsibilities still exist. So there's no running away from things like the fact that bills need to be paid. We can distract ourselves with short-term things, but those responsibilities still exist. And all these things can obviously sort of negatively impact our mental health as well. So if we are experiencing guilt, if we're, not addressing problems essentially in other areas, and just sort of using shorter term things as a wee bit of a sort of, plaster to these issues, it can leave us in quite a low place. And then obviously that's not the best place to be in to then address self-care in the first place.
Yeah. It's tricky because, not all self-soothing is going to be negative. Things like, like you said, things like swimming, not a bad thing. Physical contact with others, not bad. It has to be sort of taken very much on a case-by-case basis, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's like you were saying, it's the purpose it's serving as well. And being mindful of that, knowing why actually, I'm going to choose to do this just now. And it is going to make me feel better just now. I know it's not going to solve my problems, but I'm going to enjoy it while I do it,
It's that being that awareness, that self-awareness of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the consequences of it are. And I think sometimes we can kind of sleepwalk our way into some of these things that we don't. I know I certainly have. Oh, for sure. Yeah. But there are sometimes ways that you can combine self-care and self-soothing. So I might need to have a weighted blanket for self-care because I know that that's going to make it really. Can I make it super fluffy? Can I make it have like a fork on it or something? Because if I can do that, then that's going to be a little bit of both, isn't it? And it's going to encourage me to do it just that little bit more often. I do need to eat, but can I make it something that I find really delicious as well as being healthy? Can I do both of those things at the same time? Can I make my favorite meal that takes the least amount of dishes? That can sometimes make it a little bit easier. And then that way you can sometimes address your short and long-term needs simultaneously. So I'm immediately feeling better, and this is also going to help me in the long term with the feeling better too. I absolutely love, as a menopausal woman, I absolutely love really cold things at the moment. And if it was up to me, I would have Magnum ice creams like 15 times a day because they totally do help and they're absolutely delicious. But I know that that's really bad for me long term. So quite often I'll have like really cold water, or I'll have a mango fruit smoothie that's frozen instead. So it has the same effect. It is just as delicious, and it's much, much better and much more healthy for me. So I'm still managing to get that same self-soothing and self-care at the same time, which really does. And I can also have the Magnum ice creams, like on occasions, whenever I want to, as long as it's not every day. And it can save time if you're doing both of these things simultaneously. And I think that's one of the things that does, for me, that's like a really big key thing that helps to motivate me, is, am I going to have more time to do the stuff that I really want to do later on as well? Am I going to have time to watch an episode of my favorite TV show, play some video games, read the next chapter of my book, so that I can still get those things in? And it may save or even increase your energy levels. So while I'm at we have our lunch club, for example, which gives a lot of us, good social contact. I can eat my healthy lunch at the lunch club. I can stim with my fidget toys while I'm there too. So I can do all of these things sort of all simultaneously. And it can save money sometimes, but, it's not always possible to do all of these things. But it's worth, before just taking a wee second beforehand, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is this short-term need? Is this long-term need? How can I take a wee second to see if I can do both of them at the same time? And if possible, trying to do that too. And I can't wait for the next time we've got our lunch club so that I can just sit and, have all the fidgets. I think there's been quite a few times we've done the show with your cuddly toys at lunch club as well, because, sometimes people will sit and cuddle them and we don't even realize until somebody's mentioned it. But that's giving them this short-term and long-term at the same time. Another pairing of activities, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's like one of the big themes, isn't it? It's, doubling things up, and especially if one of them is more motivational than the other, that always helps.
Yeah. I think, yeah, we've just got our last couple of key takeaways, you know, that we've all always heard. And, you know, again, what we say together, Emma, self-care is not
Self-care isn't
selfish.
selfish.
It's not selfish. Like a million times. I think I'm gonna have that inscribed on my tombstone. I think that's gonna be the big one as well. And yeah, well-being does really refer to all aspects of your health, doesn't it? Yeah. So yeah, I think that was really interesting. I was so pleased whenever you brought those 8 aspects of well-being to us, Emma. I think it was a really, really thought-provoking, interesting way of looking at it. And it's okay to focus on just a couple of areas at a time. You know, you don't need to be solving all of the problems all immediately. Just, you know, think, right, what's achievable? What can I do that's going to make a difference to me relatively quickly? So then I've got that sense of achievement that's going to help me to go on to do the next one. And it's okay to try loads of different strategies. I don't know how many water bottles downstairs, because I was like, oh, I'll get this shiny one, I'll get this one, I'll get the next one. And the only 2 that I use are the one that's got Grogu and the one that's got Scrooge McDuck on it. So now I know which ones are actually going to do the right thing. So now I know that that's a strategy that I can then use going forward. And wherever possible, do consider combining that self-care and self-soothing, because it will help to sort of tackle both at the same time. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this. We're going to stop our recording just now, but we hope for those who are watching the recording that this has been informative and, you know, fun for listening. I've really enjoyed putting all of this together and presenting this with you, Emma, and I hope that the people who've been watching it live and recorded have got a lot out of it too. And are you okay to stop the recording just now? Thank you very much.